Hey, welcome back to the Joe Silverback Show. Today we're going to talk about friends or role models in parenting. One of the things that is quite clear in the branching off in at least American culture that I've been aware of as a young parent, starting out 30 years ago through till today, is a confusion about the role of parenting and what it means to be a parent, especially around the idea of whether or not we're our children's friends. So first and foremost, I can speak only about my own experience, and I can tell you what I think in terms of this concept in general. Your children are begging for you to be their role model, their leader, their guide, their advisor. They don't want you to be their friends. They may ask for things and they may whine and cry until you behave like that, but that's not what they need. And just remember, one of the things that separates the silverback from a wishy-washy Homo sapien and a confused and unclear Homo sapien is clarity. One of the things that separates the silverback is clarity and lack of confusion. So now growing up in California, being born and raised in California, in the most confused capital of the United States of America universe, the most exciting place in terms of breaking away from traditions that helps people in some ways and destroys people in other ways is California. What I mean by that is that, being born in 1962 and in the bursting open of what was considered the sexual revolution and the hippie generation, was that this idea that we're going to break away from our parents as role models, the church as role models, any form of authority as role models. And what we fail to understand is that built into the biological hereditary DNA of all Homo sapiens is a hierarchical arrangement. So now the hippies were the role models, and they were the parents, and they were the authorities, and they were, by and large, way worse than their parents before them. Now, this is a difficult subject for a lot of people to grasp, but we're now 50 years beyond the hippie generation, but there's so many things, just like feminism, that has had a trickle-down effect. And one of the things that's had a trickle-down effect is the feminization of men. And the feminization of men leads to a very, very confusing position if you haven't identified yourself as the silverback in your relationship with your woman, and if you haven't identified yourself as the silverback in the relationship to your children. That doesn't mean that you're not a deeply feeling, compassionate human being, but that does mean that you do know how to hold up the sword, and you do know how to make decisions, and you are not afraid of saying no. One of the things that I experimented when I was a very, very, very foolish young father was this idea of saying no to the children. And very quickly I understood that it was the most screwed up thing that I'd ever done. Now fast forward decades later, and I understand that no is far more powerful to a child than yes. This concept that I hear young parents talking about, we don't say no to our children, or we don't, speak this way to our child. We try to let him figure it out for himself. That is some kind of hogwash, and it is not what a child needs. A child needs parents who are clear on what the boundaries are, clear on what the rules are. If the parents don't know what the boundaries are, and if the parents don't know what the rules are, God save us if we expect our children to find out what those rules are. So I'm not my child's friend, and I am the one who has to be confident when it's time to put my foot down and say no. Secondly, as my children were growing, and as they were growing from these sweet, innocent, often terrorizing youngsters into their teenage years, I had to make something very clear to myself, which is that I'm not your friend, and our relationship throughout the rest of our lives is not going to be dependent upon me wanting to be your friend, and we don't have to be friends. In fact, we're going to be very, very fortunate if we have a relationship beyond just some superficial holidays and phone calls, if you do things that I don't abide by and agree with. Remember Khalil Gibran and the bow and the arrow? We're the bow, they're the arrow, and life is the force that propels them in their own direction. And remember, that direction is away from us. And if they do come back to us, it's because they do come back to us because they have found in their force, in their experience, in their life experience, that they magically have come to value what we value. But right now, I have 4 children from 19 to 29, and my 19-year-old, thank God, is out of my house, and I am so repulsed, and it's so repugnant for me to think about some of the behavior that he is demonstrating. But I don't have any qualms saying, hey, we're not friends. I'm your father. Your behavior is repugnant. It's repulsive. It's not of any interest to anybody that I would associate with. And anybody who would associate the way you associate or behave, the way you associate with me, the way you associate with your male friends, the way you associate with your female friends, anybody that I would meet out on the street who would behave like that, I would stay away from. So, if you don't have that inside you, then you need to find it. And that's all I can tell you. If you don't have that inside you, you need to find that. Now, depending on where you are on the parenting scale, and I know not everybody who's watching this video are parents, so you may be helping somebody else with their parenting skills. You may be an uncle, you may be a friend, you may be somebody who's supporting somebody with a child. It is all the same. The father's role is to set boundaries and let the child know what is acceptable and what's tolerable in his territory. That's the silverback's role. If you don't like it, find your own territory. My communication to each one of my children was, is, and always will be, when you can afford to create your own territory, independent of me, you don't have to listen to anything I say. You don't have to follow any of my rules. You don't have to abide by what's important to me. When you're in my territory, you have to follow my rules. You have to abide by what's important to me. Period. End of discussion. It's as simple as that. Furthermore, if your behavior becomes so repulsive and repugnant to my way of believing, we are not going to relate to each other at all. In fact, what's really critical, and this happened to me by accident because I had to analyze the culture that I grew up in as opposed to the culture that my father left behind as a silverback when he went off to find himself. My father and mother split up when I was 9. My mother was a saint. She took care of 5 children, and she never complained about anything or told us anything about our father. She allowed us to find our own relationship to our father. And my father was my hero all of my life. And to this day, my father is still my hero, my first mentor, my teacher, even though he did things that were devastating to my family. And one of the things that I want to share is that my father was clear about following his dream as a man. He was clear about his pursuit, and his tenacity and discipline and hard work at pursuing his dream got embedded in my psyche as a role model. He was a disaster role model as a husband. He was a disaster role model as a silverback who is a cooperative leader. And he was an amazing model of somebody who was a fierce, aggressive, assertive, driven, solitude man who worked around the clock pursuing what was critical to his journey and his vision. And that, my friends, is very, very important, because I, on the other hand, was able to have a mentor and teacher, unlike my father when he was a young man. My father did not have the Martin in his life. He did not have the wise man at 24 years old. He did not have the wise man at 25 years old or 30 years old or 35 years old. My father just was like a lot of men who he left home at 17. He went to Korea. He was at Korea from 17 to 21 years old, in the bars with Japanese prostitutes and a chaotic life as a paratrooper in a war where his friends were being blown to smithereens right before his very eyes. And when he came back home, he had a very uneducated father. So fast forward to me, I had a silverback when I was 24 stick his finger in my face and give me some lessons that allowed me to follow the principles that I'm talking about. But what has dawned on me, what has come to me all these decades later, is that one of the greatest things that ever happened to me in my life was this time period where I had to find myself on my own without any help from anybody else. And the problem today is that caring, compassionate, loving fathers and caring, compassionate, loving mothers have too much time on their hands, and they want to solve all of their children's problems into adulthood. You're not your child's friend, and you will destroy any chances of a real, healthy, mature, ongoing, lifelong relationship where your children get to share with you their successes when they reach for them, because you made them struggle while they were younger, and you didn't interfere in their suffering when they were younger, and you created a situation where they were made to deliberate on who am I, what do I want from this life, where am I going with my life, what's my purpose, how am I going to get there? Namaste. Happy Easter, Passover, happy Sunday.